Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the awesome sounds of John Henry Cassani in his musical presentation of Today, which is now airing on several radio stations. John Henry Cassani and Today.
Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. We can't go back to overs, we're just moving on. We can't go back in time because the past is gone. So give us this day, today. You say you're always sad and lonely. Well, look around, you're not alone. Every Indian has a new day. Your day is here, no, you're not. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. Today is a gift, not just a luxury. So give us this day today. What a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful day. It's your day today. You made it today. You're a winner today.
That was John Henry Cassani. I'm William Wagoner, taking off the hat for you people. Welcome to this edition of Take Back America, where we the people discuss issues. Usually it's me discussing, but sometimes I have guests that help you. And we discuss the issues of how we've lost America as we watch too much television, play too much canasta or sheephead or pinochle or bridge, and we've gotten too comfortable in not being activist citizens. We need activist citizens. Later in the show, I'm going to give you detail on how you can actually do something positive, non-violently, to get rid of the crooks that run our county, our cities, our states, and our nation. I don't count Donald Trump in that list of crooks. I'm still waiting to see how the chips fall. But I got to say this, he did have a meeting about child trafficking. And the only information I could see on videos was the summary where he ended. I would have dearly loved to have had a camera in there myself and seen if some of those people were talking about how CPS cooperates to steal children and auction them off. Not necessarily for the children's betterment, often to the children's detriment, and often to their death, while the real parents are begging to get their children back. Too often it's a single mom, sometimes it's a single dad, sometimes it's from both parents, and the children suffer, even die. 150 children, it looks like an average. We just got the statistics in for 2016. In Los Angeles County alone, 150 children just disappeared. Then they shred their files. So if somebody comes to do a forensic examination to see what happened to those children, there's nothing to examine because they've shredded their files. This little black boy that died up in, I think it was Salem, Oregon, or Portland, Oregon, after they overdosed this little boy. I mean, he's like 5 years old, and they're giving him double doses, what would be a double dose for an adult, because he won't stop crying and weeping. He wants to go home to his mommy, and he finally got to go home to his mommy after Child Protective Services drugged him to death, and he was dead. Then they said, oh, Mom, biological mom, here's your kid back. You get to bury him. We're not going to pay for the funeral expense. But when the kid was alive, they wouldn't let the mom have it. But when the kid was dead, oh, here you go, Mom. You can have your dead child back. We killed your kid for you. You know, I'm just waiting till one of these moms goes ballistic and starts shooting CPS. And then you'll see me on here saying she had it coming to it. Those people got what they deserved because they murder children. All the time running ads, oh, we protect children, we help, look at all the children we saved. And they get these actors to stand up and say, I was saved by Child Protective Services. I had a great foster mom. They forget about Logan Marr, who was duct taped to death by a CPS worker. That was my show a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to go there. I just got back from the border of San Diego and Riverside County today, Friday. Just got back. 10th of March, 2017. Last evening, I did an interview with a mom, but not about children. It was about how some criminals from overseas, probably Europe, came into her community in Marietta, a city of a size, same size as Santa Maria, about 109,000. These people came in, knocked on her door, barged into her house, and rushed up to her 7-year-old daughter's bedroom, not to take a kid, to threaten her, because she had blocked what she, as a real estate broker, I hope you real estate brokers are listening, they barged into her home to threaten her because she had blocked a $70 million little development right next to where she lived. They had originally asked her to help sell things, and then she discovered this was a scam. I'll let her explain it. And then we'll go and see what her attorney said this morning, the 10th of March. It was an interesting case, was over in 5 minutes. We thought it was going to take an hour. I put in a media request. Judge denied it, even though I put the media request in a week ago, which is all the time that's required. He just, no, I don't want any cameras. We're not going to record this. But then, well, we'll get to that. First, see our interview we did last night. Her name is Faith. Let's go and see what Faith had to say, because I think all real estate brokers need to see
William Wagner
this.
here down in Riverside County with Faith. She had a real estate license once upon a
I
time,
do still.
and she says she still does. She's in court tomorrow morning, and we're going to be there, but she wants to give us the lowdown of the scam that Camilla Harris absolutely did not try to fix. Okay, tell us, Faith.
She did not try to fix. Okay, well, a lot of you probably already have been following, and you already know the different mortgage scams. You know that these are not exactly quite kosher, but you may not exactly know why. The deeds of trust that were created in these pass-through mortgage scheme, and it was a scheme, back in 1999 when they were beta testing all these things and incorporating the MERS system through their series of trials and error. Exactly what they were is they superimposed 12-month commercial warranty deeds of conveyance onto residential property. And that's why on the deeds of trust, you're going to see MIN numbers, which are member identification numbers, right there at the top of these deeds of trust, which will identify who exactly is the originator. This one particular is countrywide. If you go and look up the MERS member identification number online and type those numbers in, that's just going to tell you who was the originator of that, actually the REMIC trust that they created and put this into. And then you're going to have a second series of numbers, which is actually the loan that they borrowed against the future value of the property.
That's the loan they borrowed against?
That's the loan that they borrowed to irrevocably transfer into trust. So if you read these contracts of these deeds of trust, and I'll take you into the contract and show you exactly where you can find this, they are essentially warranty deeds of conveyance, and you can kind of tell when you get into it. There are several things that you want to look for. Of course, you know, MERS, the electronic registration system, everybody's heard about them now. But what they really don't see or don't actually go into is how the function of these contracts actually works. And when you get into the terms of the contracts, you're going to see here transfer of rights in property, which states that the beneficiary of the security instrument, MERS, solely as the nominee for the lender and the lender's successors and assigns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the repayment of the loan, blah, 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 okay, that the borrower irrevocably grants into and conveys to trust, okay, the following described property. Well, you can't convey into trust, which that's what that says that you're doing, and be considered a mortgage. That's not a mortgage, that's putting it into a trust. And especially in the state of California, the first sentence, if you go and look up the first sentence of 2924, it says that other than trust is to be considered a mortgage, which means that all of these notices of default, all of these notices of trustee sale do not qualify as a mortgages because these are not mortgages. This is an irrevocable transfer into a classification REMIC or REMIC trust underneath a mortgage pass-through securitization scheme, which fails to securitize the instrument because they weren't designed to securitize the instrument. They were only designed to collect the collateral.
Do you think the homeowners understood that when they signed?
No, not at all.
They were clueless, weren't they?
They were, well, no, what? How could you possibly know? I mean, they weren't being explained to the brokers. I was a broker at that time. They didn't explain that to me. But what they did tell me, hey, if you adjust the margin and take a higher rate and you don't have to tell the consumer, then you can get a kickback on this loan. Well, that's a steering incentive under the Securities and Exchange Commission, that they were incentivizing the brokers to raise the value of the loan for a higher commission take. So that's what they did.
So they corrupt everybody from the ground up,
From
don't
the
they?
ground up, but they make the lower levels the scapegoats in doing so. So the government, when they were doing those investigations, they were going after, the brokers and shutting them down. And how did you qualify these people? These people are defaulting. Well, why are they defaulting? Well, they're defaulting because there's timing devices and triggering mechanisms that are already built into these loans. And it's hard for you to see because if I go too deeply into how you can derive it, where to find these codes, you can actually see end games and end dates embedded within these contracts through various ways that they do their encoding. Of course.
Really? They actually encoded the date they're going to trigger the default?
Yes, but through a series of different types of things. You can't just get it off of the barcode. You can't just get it off of the deed of trust. So you have to kind of follow it on title as to exactly how they're doing it. The best source is if you ever see one that's from CoreLogic on a normal recording on an assignment, you don't get those barcodes. This is a generated barcode from CoreLogic in specifically that goes on here. And if you look closely at these numbers, you can see that what they're doing is it's functioning at that as a 1031 exchange, because those are the first few numbers. And each number does go in and represent a series of different parts of the Internal Revenue Codes, typically under US Code 26. This particular one goes into 29752, which in effect is 26752, which is how they're going to disperse this particular loan under the IRS codes, or how they're classifying it for easier tax write-off.
Why doesn't the IRS stop this?
Because the federal, because they're using the backdoor depreciation swaps as backdoor buddy swaps, and they've been writing off antecedent debts of the federalized banking system, utilizing this double dipping for a long time now.
So does that help keep the system grinding along? This big giant Ponzi scheme?
This big giant Ponzi scheme created this big giant house of cards. That house of cards had to go somewhere. And when they were granting all these depreciation write-offs and saying, oh no, homeowner, really, it's okay, you're getting this 1099 forgiveness under the Kirby versus US Lumber, which is your IRS embedded codes, US 26, 63, and 108. Basically, you are familiar that you get a 1099 because you somehow are granted a economic benefit for the forgiveness of a debt, right?
Theory.
In theory. But what's happening is on these is that there were never any monies passed. And the reason there weren't any monies passed is that they were utilizing the APR values, or the future values. You know, when you get on your good faith estimate, you could actually see, for example, if your home was like $1 million or $1.5 million, your APR would be close to $7.8 or $8 million. That is the money that investor would transfer into through the big boys like HSBC. And let's no joke, I mean, they were indicted up over in the UK for money laundering. This is no different. These are just giant money laundering schemes. They are structured money laundering. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. In fact, this is basically the transaction structure of one of these classification remics that actually shows you these are investor interests. They're being passed through the HSBC, who passes it through. They exchange it for certificates. The certificates, if you look at the prospectus, will show you that they were attached to the manipulated LIBOR index that they were controlling and that they had a rest on. So they were controlling the payouts back to the investors, but they were also using the investor funds to filter through because of the timing mechanisms on these contracts. So they were actually shorting the U.S. housing bond market by predicting when these were going to default against the consumer.
Wow, if you knew that in advance, you could make a lot of money.
You could have, yeah, and they did.
And they did, and then they left the country with the money, didn't they?
They did. And
wow, that's quite a chart. Wow.
Yeah, that's actually the MERS system in play. You can see it functions in three different parts. There's this part right here, this part in the center, and this part on the other side. When they take their certificates down here and they pass them through into the system, it actually goes through a series of pass-through events. It goes into their ACE depositors in the center. Now, ACE depository is not a depositor, and neither is the lender, who is actually the originator of these classification remics. Now, these classification remics are tax-exempt remics under IRS 860. So they are not designed either to hold the note or the deed. That's why you have such depositions as Kemp versus Countrywide. It says that the notes never left the file. They never left the file because they were not designed to do so. They were separate promissory notes. These were 12-month purchase and sale leasebacks that you did not really realize that you were getting into. And you can tell right here on the borrower covenants. Now, contract law is very specific. Whenever you see in all caps like this borrower covenants means that that's not you as a borrower. That's actually an entity borrower that is covenanted, that you are lawfully seized of the estate and conveyed and grant free and clear of encumbrances. It states it right there. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, I as an entity borrower, undisclosed to who I am borrowing money from, am going to be taking this property, seizing you from it, and utilizing it for a freehold use in your fee simple estate for the collateral that I intended to obtain off of the future value. So what you're putting in through MERS effectively is acting as a 1031 exchange, is your property, so your $1 million or $1.5 million property, and the back end, what the investors think they're putting in are the $7 or $8 million into that property. It's an imbalance of equity, which means that these do not qualify under 2924 as a mortgage because they are not mortgages. They're deeds and conveyances. Okay, so these taking free and clear of encumbrances, you can tell if as you go through the contract a little bit more how the contract works between how it connects to the classification REMIC and how these monies are actually getting filtered through.
Define for the people, we the people, REMIC.
Real estate investment mortgage conduit. So
Define that.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure the average person would understand what you just said.
okay, so when you have a pass-through system, or you've heard of the mortgage electronic system, a pass-through system, people don't understand what a pass-through REMIC is, or if they're being foreclosed upon. Well, who is this HSBC, the trustees on behalf of the certificate holders that are, who are these certificate holders? Well, those certificate holders hold compound certificates. So they aren't actually a holder in due course. In fact, when they foreclose on the property, the banks build in so much of this fake interest that they apparently lost that they never even see any kind of proceeds from the sale of the home. All they're seeing are the monthly interest dividends that are being paid out to them against the certificate itself. And most of these certificates, since they were designed to fail, they've already taken losses, or IRS losses and losses from Deutsche Bank against their investor frauds to pay them off to reimburse them for the money that they were defrauded from for pennies on the dollar.
And that's what Faith told me just yesterday afternoon, just before sunset. And it was interesting. If you're in real estate or mortgage lending, a lot of what she's saying will still not make sense to you. That's how corrupt what I call the bank gangsters are. But in her case, what they did is come to her house, barge in. When she answered the door, they barged in and were more than just rude. And later she goes in to tell us how she had to flee for her life and take her husband and her family, her daughters, and flee to another state from her $2 million home in a gated community because thugs were angry with her because she had figured out the fraud. I think I'll let Faith tell you the story. We'll go back to that, and then we'll get to the clip where she was in the hallway of the courtroom today at Murrieta, California.
He sent out...
The head justice sent this out.
The head justice, Daniel Ortelio, and his wife, Liv. It's a small town. His wife, Olivia, is on the same board of realtors in the same town that this is located. And they have they've created this little empire of over 39 franchises up and down the coast, from all the way down to Oceanside, all the way up into Beverly Hills, to where what happens is they will surf their court cases for real estate that can be transferred into their real estate company for a commission benefit. And that commission benefit, they've already sent their agents up here to Amy Alvarez to come up here to kind of scope out the house. She has a listing over there with First Team Real Estate that they dropped their price down to match the mock auction they conducted here for $1,195, so that they could try to sell that house, which was stemmed from another Moreno Valley court case that was wrongful, unlawful detainer foreclosure. They kicked him out off of one of these countrywide loans. So, yeah.
You're saying Judge Ortelio is engaged in illegal real estate transfers to gain a commission for his wife?
I'm saying that he reports on his California 700 form a 10% vested interest in First Team Real Estate off of Main Street, where his wife hangs her real estate license, who have come here to try to solicit me under the ruse that they're handing out notepads to scope out the property. That's what I'm telling you. And I have documented thousands of properties that I took a sample from and calculated at least 85 to 90% of these REO transfers are being derived from court cases, and that they're going directly into their real estate company.
And the judge has a 10% interest? How much interest does his wife have?
I have no idea, because I don't believe she has to report on a California 700 form.
That's right. She doesn't have to file a financial disclosure form. Well, that's certainly very cozy, but is it illegal? It's really cozy.
Yeah, but it's to blur that line when you're going in under a cause of action that can never be barred. Because this loan, once I found out that they did this refinance against me, I rescinded it, and we uncovered which is going to be, cook your noodle now, is that the undisclosed interest charges, $660,000 matched the notice of default for the 10-year bond this thing's attached to on the back end with a 99.1% accuracy. So we didn't have the exact figures back in 2009, but we predicted what that notice of default was going to say in 2015 when they finally corrected it to the 12-month installment that it was.
Well, judges are supposed to avoid even the appearance of impropriety under the judicial canons.
I know, and I went in there and asked under a 170.6 preemptive to please recluse himself. And what they did instead is he had the opposing attorney against me take side against him for protection and state that I didn't respond properly to their request for corrections because I forgot to number the bottom of my pages, and therefore I did not respond to them in a timely manner, which would be 3 days before on a holiday weekend, which means I actually had 2 days to respond, negative 2 days actually, to get the corrections made to the court. That's why he couldn't recluse himself as a judge, even though I presented to him the documentation that says, look, there's court cases here. You're being transferred over all these court cases, and you're in here, you're asking me questions. Oh, that must be a nice house. Yeah, tell me more about it. Well, I'm sorry, that's a very obvious, looking back in retrospect, thing to ask somebody when you're scoping out their property, that whether or not you're going to rule against them.
Would seem to be the appearance of a conflict of interest. It would at least have the appearance.
It would cause reasonable doubt under the canon laws that the courts are being compromised. And I believe with all hard hearts, and you can understand why they're cynical, because they're losing their pension fund, they're losing their CalPERS, and what is killing me is in knowing how deep and how these systems operate and how they're transposing and passing through these funds in this elaborate money laundering scheme in from Europe into the UK into the US, using the US housing bond market to short it so that they don't have to report that money laundering fiasco. Is that when they're reconstitution, like when they're doing these, I'm Bank of America, I'm just going to create an assignment of deed of trust. Well, that's not a corporation assignment of deed of trust from them originally. This is just a fabricated deed of trust that they pulled out and decided, hey, we're just going to create this. We're going to create this through our core logic, which is their database integrity, which I showed you tracks it, and then we're going to put the address to where the Internal Revenue Services corporate office is, but MERS also happens to have an office, to expedite this process. So when they're taking these fabrications and creating these fake deeds of trust, and then they're assigning it between each other, like this one here, you're going to notice things like, well, there's this word right here, it's called mortgage. It's crossed out and recorded on title as crossed out. Why is that crossed out? Well, it's because they were given a depreciation write-off for a mortgage that they never lent. These were all tandem NAT advances off of the collateral when they did the reverse sale purchase. just like in a commercial reverse sale purchase. If you purchase a property, you're leasing it back, but you're buying the property, and that's how they work these residential properties. So in their minds, they've already bought this property. Okay, well, all right, fine. I already bought this property, and so I'm leasing this property back at a monthly payment of, according to this contract or these notices of defaults under these 12-month undisclosed, installment loans that all of a sudden they're attaching by these contracts of adhesions, that really, in essence, these are $1,800 a month, a day that you're paying for a rental that they're disclosing in a UD court is only a couple $100. So we fall under 10,000, and no, you get to be here because you're limited in your ability to be able to actually go upon the frauds that are happening. Now, in my case, they failed to perfect title within 15 days under 2924 HC, which means they can never perfect title because, first of all, these are not mortgages. These are warranty deeds of conveyance for freehold use in the fee simple estate. There are title issues here. You can't just up and try to probate my home. These are federal state issues. And the contracts, because of the way that they were created, they don't create a mortgage because they're transferring them into trust. So they're creating all these notices and these trusts and recording them that they cannot do under state laws. That's why they're in violation of federal and state laws. And that's why they were made the poster child for the National Mortgage Settlement Act, because all they were doing was prolonging the mortgage crisis in and of itself. Those contracts were never intended to be settled or restructured on any level. Go ahead.
So Judge Ortello is personally aiding and abetting in these frauds and these assignments of these conveyances, deeds of trust,
Right, rule of
with
evidence
the mortgage
802,
crossed off.
which means
'Cause it
that they've
wasn't-
taken the loss.
I just can't believe they could get away with recording that with the word mortgage crossed off.
But
And
they
you
do.
found this on the county records
Repeatedly. This is common practice for them.
for Judge Ortello or his wife?
No. For the federalized banking industry. No, the federalized banking industry on this property here gave a third-party graft benefit of $1.5 million in a depreciation write-off to the non-bank servicer, whom was proclaiming that HSBC, the trustee of these certificates, was the original lender. Well, they weren't the original lender at all. In fact, the previous servicer, Bank of America, had no idea, who was under the Wells Fargo, whom I worked for, who's the master servicer, that had even been transferred. So Specialized Loan Servicing, who should have been answering to Wells Fargo, the master servicer, was actually answering to the trustee certificate holders of a terminated REMIC, because what they would do with these on the back end is very similar to how you explained it to me. They would season them for a year, and then they would take the entire bundle and they would refinance the entire bundle into a new investment conduit that wasn't securitizing it, because to actually securitize it, you'd have had to purchase the property into the REMIC. There's a form that you would need to fill out for that. It's an 8594 form. That's IRS form. That is an asset purchase acquisition. The REMICs are designed specifically, and there's 3 different REMICs under a mortgage pass-through trust. They're all tax-exempt vehicles, and they're all designed to do separate things underneath the pass-through trust. So when you get the classification REMIC, that's the pooled loans that you kind of, if you've heard about or keep up on, that's just one REMIC underneath that system. Never designed to hold the note, never designed to hold the deed, but it is designed to hold abandoned properties under the 1099A or a 1099C, cancellation of debt or abandonment of property. And because of that 1031 that's going on and it's abandoned, well, the IRS says under Kirby versus US Lumber, well, if I take that 1099 off of this newly created assignment deed of trust, well, I can reconstitute the value and pretend that there's a mortgage there.
What a beautiful scheme.
Isn't it gorgeous? I mean,
Beautiful scheme.
the architect was a genius who created this, and that's not even going into how these are dispersed and how they are filtered through under the IRS codes. But it all, at the end of the day, money laundering, and it is tax evasion.
Yeah, well, tax evasion, yeah. And money laundering. securities violations.
Well, this timing devices and triggering mechanism and steering incentives. So yeah, the Securities and Exchange Commission says that that is a violation of the Securities and Exchange Act.
So it brings me to the question, Faith, why has the FBI not just done a dragnet and taken them out like they did in Chicago back in the Greylord investigation 30, 40 years ago? They arrested a dozen judges. A few of them went to prison.
I wish, because the judges don't realize that these extra 1099s that are being issued against alternate swap outs of depreciation are raping the states of their pension plans. And they think by foreclosing on these properties, they're going to get that money back. But what they're doing is they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're never going to see that money back.
Maybe that's what you should tell them in court tomorrow.
Well, we're trying to. We have a professional title witness and a forensic auditor who follows it all the way down to the CalPERS portion of how the judges are paid through their CalPERS pensions. If you can actually show and document how these never get to them, even if they're foreclosed upon, they never get to them. So all that this particular justice is doing is he's saying, okay, well, you know, I can't fix the system. They're already doing this. I'm just going to go ahead and roll. If these people decide to come back and appeal, okay, well, whatever, I lost. But if not, well, then I get a listing and I get my money back. This is how I'm going to get my pension. But unfortunately, he did it all the way up and down the coast, and I think he's being blinded now by actually realizing that a lot of these truths are coming out. And you cannot ignore rulings like the Jesenowski ruling, which is applicable to me because I rescinded it within that 3-year period of time. And you cannot...
What year was that ruling?
2015. Jesenowski versus Countrywide.
Countrywide was out of business by then, wasn't it?
They were. But because I'm pretty sure Jesenowski. Maybe I'm misspeaking, but let me double check.
And she did check. And this woman had her father beaten up really severely, put in the hospital because her father would not disclose to the criminals what state she had fled to with her husband and children. And she has changed her name. Her original name wasn't Faith, but she has changed her name just in case the criminals come back to America and come looking for her. Because she's, she's really blowing the whistle, not just on the judges in the corrupt court, but on the people behind them that are in back of the judges. And now you begin to understand why David Fee couldn't get justice. Evie Quaid and her husband Randy Quaid could not hope to get justice, although they were originally arrested on the bogus warrants issued by this county, Santa Barbara County. They were arrested and they came back from Canada into state of Vermont, and the Vermont judge looked at this and said, where is the substance? There's no substance in this warrant. Joyce Dudley, just on a side, Joyce Dudley, you need to relook at this and get rid of that warrant that you've got against Evie and Randy Quaid. The real story has not been told, but I hope to get to it really soon. Really soon. But that's on Evie and Randy Quaid that thought they owned a house in Santa Barbara, but they never signed any documents. Any signatures that were on any documents, Evie told me very recently, were not hers or her husband's. They were fraud. And so we have this mortgage fraud, people just stealing your ID and signing your name, taking equity out of your home. You don't even know it until you get a foreclosure notice for not paying, whatever the finance bank gangsters demand. Now, we're going to go back to Faith again. She's got some good stuff here. I hope you're paying attention. I hope you can follow this. I've already seen at least 5 people that I know in Santa Maria that I personally know, not because of this show, but because I know through my social connections, that have already been bamboozled out of their homes with total fraud. And the sheriff, Bill Brown, needs to start looking at this, send himself and his deputies to a class put on by these forensic document examiners so they can lawfully say to the bank gangsters, we are not going to carry out this unlawful detainer on this homeowner. We are not going to serve them notice to get out of their own home. But the sheriffs simply aren't trained. This is way above sheriff training. Way, way, way above. You're lucky if you have one or two in a big county, in a big city, one or two detectives that get any training in this kind of white-collar crime. And that's why so many people are being harmed, because the sheriffs are ignorant, the judges are colluding and or are ignorant of what the real truth of these fraudulent documents are. And if you lose your home, your castle, because of a crooked bank gangster flim-flam, what freedoms can you maintain if you can't even keep your home? Then you can't keep your children. Then you don't have an address, you can't keep a job. And it just snowballs. America's being destroyed internally. And I'm hoping, praying, that Donald Trump put some people with some real muscle to undo all this damage to bank gangsters. What's interesting about FACE is the actual criminals. These guys weren't even pretending to be attorneys representing. They were just criminals saying, we don't like you objecting to us doing our scam on the property next to you. Since you're not going to be a part of it, we want you to shut your mouth. Anyway, let's go back to Faith.
Into the mail and say, I quit. I quit because you have violations in excess of X dollars. In my case, it was in excess of $660,000 of undisclosed interest and 1.5% of undisclosed interest rate. And that was even to me as a broker who was given incentives to raise the rates. I could have raised them against myself, but that didn't disclose to me, even as a broker, that they were changing those rates behind the scenes to create those embedded triggering and timing devices. I mean, this was all done. The people were being forced. They had no choice.
That's what Pam Ragland said. She had signed one loan and then found out later they raised the interest rates. And she had no knowledge that they were going to raise it. And that's why she got behind and they foreclosed on her. But she sued and she won because they let her testify for 2 hours and they were begging her attorney to settle out of court. I don't know how much she got. She would never disclose it because it was part of the settlement.
Right.
Which I think should be illegal. It should be mandatory that they have to reveal the settlement amount. It should not be a secret. We should have open government, open.
No, they put a lot
CO.
of gag orders on a lot of these, especially when they feel like they're not going to win. And that's the thing, is they think by kicking me out of the house, it's going to stop me from pressing charges against them. And no, it's not going to happen.
Didn't stop Pam Ragland.
Yeah, they put gag orders on homeowners, on real estate brokers. Gag orders by the judges. The judges are the only people that can issue gag orders. President can't issue a gag order. The legislature or Congress can't do that. So the judges issue gag orders so the homeowners can't tell their neighbors or the media or anybody else how crooked all this bank scamming is. And it's affecting 98% of every home in America. This is an ongoing steamrolling. It's one of the reasons I was very good at real estate sales, but I wouldn't sell a house anymore. Too many of them have been foreclosed on illegally, fraudulently, unlawfully. And so someday down the road, everybody who helps sell those fraudulent homes is going to see themselves, or should see themselves, either pending criminal charges or facing civil litigation for aiding and abetting. I mean, gag orders on homeowners that just want to tell people what just happened to them? This is America? This is the country I went to Vietnam to defend? This is the country our forefathers fought for? gag orders on homeowners so they can't tell the truth? Watch this next clip, please.
Revenue Service, because they were going after them for apparently they weren't paying their taxes either, so they were trying to get them for tax evasion.
Them being not judge or teller,
No, the grifters that were
the drifters that were theoretically
that were connected
occupying.
back in through New York, back into the seas, back into Florida, that they were doing all these investigations. And the only thing
So
that
when the IRS was done with them, they came to talk to you as a witness, or as a...
No, because I was the last person to purchase here on this property, and because I was a broker who had, who brokered to subprime lenders, and including Countrywide, but I never brokered with Realty 123 or whatever it was that started up this pump and dump community, which I think was the only thing that saved me in this community when they finally realized, well, wait a minute, she's really a victim, she's innocent, she didn't do anything wrong, they just took her name and ran with it. So it was an inside job. Of what they were doing with me. But when they were done, I'm getting a phone call from the Department of Justice up here and the FBI, and so I'm in Washington trying to get my husband into the hospital, and all this is going on, and they're calling me up asking me for information to where they were being so aggressive. I actually had to get an attorney. Thank God I found an attorney who actually worked up here with some of their investigations that they were doing, who moved to Seattle, needle in a haystack. But if it wasn't for him, the FBI would have had me indicted and thrown in jail for crimes I never committed.
based on somebody else signing documents with your name. That's what happened to Cindy. And she's still in her house 10 years after it.
Yeah, Cindy, I don't know why.
She's my hero.
She has the most blatant, obvious case of outright fraud that there ever could be.
And the DA won't lift a finger?
No.
And she's even got the letter from Michelle Lipton, who was working for the state of California at the time, that told Craig Ronald Diamond to cease and desist.
Yes.
And now she's working for Tony Rakowski, the DA, and I called her. Said, now you're in the perfect position to issue the arrest warrant. She says, well, it's not my department. And there's other issues. And we ran it up the flagpole and decided there was too many issues. So we're not doing that. I thought, somebody got to Michelle Lipton. That's what I was thinking. I didn't tell her that, but
Well,
you read that letter, it's really clear.
They have ways. And I will tell you that HSBC scares the living freaking crap out of me. These people are criminals. They come from a criminal background. They work with the cartel. They've been indicted for money laundering. They've been involved in these investigations of all this Ponzi scheme that they're pulling, and they're not above paying graft benefits like it's handing out candy. And that's what's really killing me.
You're saying of the H what?
HSBC.
Which is?
HSBC USA is the national trustee for the Deutsche A 2006 OA4 certificate series that they manipulated the LIBOR, offered certificates in exchange for, obtained collateral based upon the APR value on this home of, I think it was like $7.8 million, placed it irrevocably into trust, put this home on a freehold use irrevocably into trust, creating an imbalance of equities of over $5 million. So yeah, right now they paid, they incentivized specialized loan servicing, also back a Hong Kong related bank, to come in and rate me up the you-know-what by issuing me all these notices upon a loan that was already written off in their system and taken care of years ago, to where now, all of a sudden, they got a $9.5 million depreciation tax write-off because they fabricated all this stuff so that they could reconstitute the value and not have to pay the state of California, which again goes back to the CalPERS don't get funded.
In all that, I also heard you say they got paid off years ago as if it was a deadbeat loan.
It is.
And they collected on the insurance on it, so they didn't lose anything.
They didn't lose a dime.
And
And
yet
they got it, and they wrote it off back then. That's
And
why
now-
the word mortgage is crossed off.
And now they want to throw you out of the house and resell it again.
Because they're pissed off because I blocked a $70 million project to them.
I can understand why they're angry. I still wonder why the DA of this county of Riverside,
Told me flat out, no one would help me.
the DA told you, the elected
Told me-
DA.
The elected DA. He told
What
me
year?
That was when I came back here. I think it was like 2013 or 2014.
And the DA was who?
Oh God, I forget his name. I'm sorry. I was talking to somebody. I may not have been directly the DA. I might be misspeaking, but it was somebody in the DA's office who said, "Well, how did you purchase the home originally?" And he started to go off on that rant, and I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. That home, the purchase of the home, has nothing to do with this refinance. This refinance is not real. Why am I being kicked out of a home off of a loan I never took?"
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it occurs to me is this is exactly the situation, is when you need those We the People 504 US 36 grand juries of We the People. If you find enough victims like yourself
Yeah,
and form 2 grand juries, you can indict the DA that didn't do his job. You can indict all the money laundering people, even Judge Ortello, according to what Scalia wrote in that opinion. That's what I'm thinking.
I don't believe and I don't agree with what he's doing, especially for innocents here that are fighting for their homes. You can't just throw them out because, oh, well, you need to pay a mortgage. Well, no, well, what was the circumstances? Was it one of these pass-through? Was it triggered? Did they have a choice? What was going on at that time? I mean, everybody was set up for falling. And even the people that got set up and got led and steered into these loans, because they were steered into these loans because the money was good and brokers were getting payouts on it. You know, and again, to adjust the interest rates, and again, violation of the Securities and Exchange. You can't use steering incentives, but that's what they did. So he's throwing all these victims out on the street, and he's profiting off of it, and that is not right. He's in a position for the people, and he should be taking care of the people that he's serving. And he wasn't even elected. Arnold Schwarzenegger appointed him, so he can be recalled.
Well, they can all be recalled. The question is, who can put up enough money to educate enough people to actually make the recall successful? That's the real question.
That's the true question.
And when you've got a government of criminals, by the criminals, run for the criminals, not for we the people.
Yes, it makes it very difficult. If you don't play criminal ball, then you get washed out. And they're just mad because I won't play criminal ball.
So are you ready to run an ad in the local newspaper and form your own 504 US 36 We the People grand jury under Scalia's guidelines?
Honestly, I am scared to death to do so because I like my life and I like my family and I don't want them to get hurt. And I've had my father's significant other mysteriously passed away by swallowing her tongue. I've had my father beaten to send him back and gave up on life even though he healed. He didn't want to live without her, so he passed away and I couldn't go to his own funeral. I've had experienced people's cars blowing up in front of me from chasing me 2 states away. I've had home invasions, so I am not really the right person for that particular category. I am not in a frame of mind where I can actually focus or help people anymore, unfortunately. And that's
Well, I can understand why. Well, thank you for this interview, Faith, and we'll see what happens in tomorrow's court.
We'll see.
Even if they don't allow my camera, I'll be watching.
I know you will.
And I'll do an interview when I leave court. Then I'll go straight home and prepare to do a live show tomorrow night.
How much time
Oh,
left?
Lord have mercy.
And we'll get it out. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. People need to know.
Well, people, and I did come straight home. And you're hearing this less than 30 hours after that interview. But now we're going to take you. It was interesting because she's been so traumatized by the DA of Riverside County allowing these criminals to run their scam, so criminalized the whole situation that she was living in fear for years. And only in the last 2 years or so did she feel comfortable again. And she is afraid to form a grand jury, as you heard her say, because number one, the main criminals have fled America, gone back to Europe or Italy or wherever they came from, probably worked for some big bankers there. See, they scam the money and they export it. What's insane is if you've ever owned property and sold it recently, you see that the IRS at the escrow makes you file all these forms. And if you're from a foreign country, they keep a big chunk of anything you sell. But that's not what's happening here. Here, they have a a assignment of a trust, and they crossed off the word mortgage. And they got away with it. And the IRS, as far as I can tell, hasn't lifted a finger to go after these criminals, stealing hundreds of millions of dollars on homes, not just in Riverside, but Orange County, Los Angeles County. I'm told, I haven't checked it yet, but even Ventura County, which is right south of Santa Barbara County, where we, the more genteel people, prefer to reside. It's just amazing. So I have my media request in. I don't know. They didn't tell me when they denied it, probably that this morning when I was asking about whether it got approved or denied. See, judges don't want transparency. They don't want you that are part of we the people to understand the corruption is a mountain. It's a tidal wave in court. In fact, today, while we were waiting for our case, some woman had gone in before us and she had her little kids and whatnot, and she went out and she was so traumatized by what the judge said to her in the court, she collapsed as soon as she got outside the door. She just fell to the ground. And they eventually, and I got a photo on my cell phone of 4 bailiffs standing around, not helping her, just watching her as she's laying there on the ground, and one of her families lifting her up. But eventually the ambulance came and took her away. Court has become a traumatizing thing. But anyway, getting back to Faith, she had paid her jury's fees, and that's another thing. Where in the Constitution does it say to get a jury on a civil case, you must pay $400 or any amount of money? I don't see that in the Constitution anywhere. Again, the bar-carded courts, the bar-carded criminals with black robes, and they go in there and they're attorneys, and I'm the attorney on this case, Your Honor, and blah, blah, blah. I almost never call a judge Your Honor. There's very few judges worthy of the word honor. I call them judge, because if you look under their name, it doesn't say honor, it says judge. You know, Donald Duck, judge. Anyhow, she had filed, paid her jury fees. She had her ADA advocate because she is so shaken. And that interview she did was probably the calmest she had been in many, many days. And then today she had to go to court, and just sitting outside the courtroom was traumatizing to Faith. So traumatizing, she had a little dog. Well, not a little dog, but a 9-year-old dog there, and he's wearing this little jacket. The dog's wearing a jacket that says emotional support. That's accorded to her under ADA, Americans with Disability Act. And after you've been hosed down in these courts and bludgeoned by the judge and shoved around by the bailiff, and the clerk says, you sit over there and shut up and we'll tell you when we're going to get to you. These are not the courts the Founding Fathers had in mind. In fact, in the First and Second Supreme Court of the United States, not one of them had ever been a member of the state or national or the European or the London bar. None of them had been bars. In fact, bar attorneys or any attorney that got their training in London were forbidden to go into most state courtrooms. That's just an aside. Anyway, Faith had her dog. She had her ADA representative, Cindy Brown, was there. I had my media. She had her media there. And she had a forensic examiner to prove to the court that what they're doing to her documents on her property are bogus and void from the beginning, and she should be granted a fee simple. I would like to see fee simple absolute, but only attorneys know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, so this is what happened this morning. We wait, we wait, we wait. There's the docket. She's number 8, and yet she was almost the last case they called.
Let's be clear here, okay?
There's Faith.
I sign verifications for my clients all the time if they're not readily available to sign it. Okay, it doesn't mean that I am a recipient witness. It means that I verify the contents of the complaint. Let's say that he didn't have personal knowledge and that he didn't properly verify it. all that leaves us with is an unverified complaint. That's it. That just means that it's an unverified complaint. That just means that they have to prove the same things they have to prove already. Like they have certain things they have to prove at trial, whether it's a verified complaint or unverified complaint. It doesn't change that ultimately.
Tangled a little.
Ultimately.
Can you say again what you said? I want to get it on camera. There's not going to be a trial today.
Okay, are you videotaping?
Yeah, I am taping. Yes, I am.
What is this for?
I am. This is for a television show about her case.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm William Wagner. I'm the host of the show.
Yeah. I'm Patricia
Patricia
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez.
Nice to meet you. Pleasure.
Nice to meet you too. So it's continued to Tuesday, but you don't know the time or day.
Right.
But it is Tuesday.
Yes.
This coming Tuesday?
Yes. The 14th.
And you don't know what judge.
We don't know what judge yet, and we don't know what courtroom yet because they have to find us a place for the jury trial.
Does that sound like this judge just wanted to throw the hot potato out of his hands and throw it to somebody else?
No, I think it's less of that and more resources. You know, there's only so many resources, and to do a jury trial takes about a half a day to a day, maybe even a day and a half. And so he already has a full calendar, and that means that he needs to send it to somebody who has less going on. But in terms of the way this judge was ruling while watching him while I was in the courtroom, he seemed very pro-bank, very pro-plaintiff, kind of just gave everything a cursory review, and he would kind of lead the plaintiff into saying what he needed them to say to justify his ruling in favor of the banks.
So this was a good thing for Faith.
Yes, definitely. I want to get us in front of a better judge, more impartial, a fairer judge who, he also said that he'd only tried one jury case ever in his however many years of practicing, so I would want somebody who's a little bit more familiar with the process of a jury trial.
Very
So I
good.
think it's great that we're getting sent back out to get to a very fair, impartial, and seasoned, experienced judge.
Very good. That's all I needed. Thank you. That's the story on Faith, who's got Faith down at the courthouse, trying to save her house from criminals who've left the country with her money and her lunch. And they took her lunch, and she's left fighting remnants. That's it. Well, folks, that was just today. I'm still wearing the same red shirt. Why do I wear a red shirt, a bright red shirt, when I go to court? Because I want the judge to absolutely know media is here. I'm here, and I'm watching you, Judge. Whether it's Judge Stewart, Judge Schmuck, Judge Hernandez, Judge Ochoa, I want them to know so they have no qualms that somebody who can put their image on TV and talk about what they just did to screw the innocent people is there watching. Interestingly, when that crooked attorney who went to prison for a couple of years, he should have done an extra couple, but he didn't serve his whole term, Alan W. Courtney, this is back, who was the last of several attorneys and judges that robbed the now dead singer that I had on this show. Alan Courtney didn't serve enough time in prison, but he at least did some. There were other attorneys who helped steal this elderly man's estate, and our sheriff of Santa Barbara should have delivered to him his homeowner exemption money, and he never got it. But I'm going aside. Anyway, what was interesting, this was all in front of a judge. You never saw the judge. We never got the camera in the courtroom. The media request was denied. But I sat and watched him, and what attorney Patricia Hernandez was also wearing a red thing. She didn't go into court like that. She had a very nice tailored pinstripe suit, which probably made her too hot. And when she came out, she removed it right before we started the interview. But what she noticed, I noticed, that the defendants weren't showing up, and the plaintiffs were getting everything they wanted. Even when one Pennymack was there with an attorney and their plaintiff against somebody named Zane. And
even though the defendant was there. The plaintiff won. And this guy's name was Wachek, Albert J. Wachek. And he admitted he had only done one jury trial. So he was remanding this case, even though Faith had a forensic expert there, document expert. She had her ADA advocate, and she had an absolute right to have it filmed under ADA rules. If you qualify because you've been traumatized by the injustice of the system, you can get an ADA advocate, and you have an absolute right to have it filmed with a videographer of your choice. Not the court's choice, your choice. You also have to pay for them, but it helps a lot of people because while they're in court, they're traumatized, and a lot of things are going by their head. The attorney has to explain it to them over and over and over later and then show it to them on video because people have been so traumatized by our rotten courts. And you know they're rotten because they've got all the security. Supposedly all of us people, we the people, are coming in with weapons to harm the bailiffs and harm the judges. No, we aren't. They just want to make you know that you're a peon, that you're a low-level debt slave, and you have no rights. These are all administrative courts. And this judge, Albert J. Wachek, definitely was an administrative judge, just cranking the people through. So he remanded it back to Tuesday. We don't know when Tuesday, where Tuesday. It might even be in a different city in Riverside. We don't know. And even Faith's attorney doesn't know. And we don't know if that's going to be just a status conference to set the trial or if that's going to start the trial. Do you see why I get angry about our courts? I put my life at risk. I had 5 cousins die in Vietnam. My best friend died in Vietnam, defending this country that treats our people so shabbily that they get traumatized and they need someone like Cindy Brown, Americans Disability Act representative, to come in and help them through the process. And in fact, Faith had first I thought it was a seeing eye dog for blind people, but it had the thing, and I have it on my phone where I did a close-up and just took a picture. It was interesting. She had this dog. Here's the dog. I don't know if you can get that shot, if you can see it, but there's the dog, and if you zoom in really tight, before we go to this tape, you see her dog sitting right next to her chair, and he's wearing this little jacket that says emotional support. That's because she's ADA approved, and they allowed her to bring her dog because they have to. And what the judge probably had a clue about that with this ADA rep, with the media there, me, with her document expert, this judge realized he was in over his head and he wasn't going to do anything. Smart decision, because had Faith come in and they had started the proceeding and she had demanded a filming of it, and if the judge had said, no, I'm not going to allow videotaping, that's a felony against the judge, and the judge can be prosecuted. And if a judge is prosecuted for a felony, there's a very good chance he's going to be removed from the bench. So this judge, Albert J. Wachek, he did a smart thing for him. But it was a win for Faith because she'd paid her jury fees, and now at some future date, we don't know yet, she's going to get a jury to look at the documents and have an expert witness. This particular witness, I think her name was Pamela. Her last name was started with a Z, but it's irrelevant at this point. The important thing is it was a win, because whoever these criminals are trying to steal her home, they're going to have to pay their attorney. For their crook's attorney, it's ka-ching, 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 more money, got to come back to court again, ka-ching, money for them. But for their client, it was a loss today. And all this adds more stress to Faith, who's seen the results of her father being beaten up by the criminals, literally physically beaten up, because he would not divulge to them where Faith, her daughters, and her husband were hiding in another state. Because these people weren't just your average criminal attorney, crooked attorney. These were not even attorneys. These weren't even anybody connected to the law. They're just criminals, had this scheme, she blocked the scheme, we're going to smash you. But since all this is unraveled, they've fled the country, we think. So with that, I want to remind you about this judge. His name isn't Judge Schmuck. His name is Judge William D. Stewart. And he's in Department A of Burbank, California, nestled in the mountains there, where a lot of rich people live. A lot of movie stars, Jay Leno, and a whole lot of people have big fancy homes up in the mountains there. And this Judge Stewart came to the same conclusion on the Collins case, that the original documents they signed was void, led by Marie McDonald, also a forensic document expert. And when they were done, he ordered a judgment be prepared for him to sign. That was November 10th. And here, back on February 24th, he refused to sign his own judgment. How nuts is this? He ordered it, and then he refuses to sign it between November 10th and February 24th. Did somebody go tap, tap, tap? Don't sign that, Judge. Don't you dare. We got dirt on you, and we're going to not let this homeowner prove that we're all criminals. So you better not sign that. Is that what happened? I don't know. But I can tell you there were a dozen people in that room in Department A of Burbank Superior Court all around me. And when they got outside, they're all saying, somebody got to the judge has been fixed. They castrated the judge, he's not going to do it. And that happens. I saw it happen with a U.S. Marine who became a judge in a federal courthouse in Santa Ana like 8 years ago. Unbelievable. Judge David O. Carter, I'll never forget your name, sir. You said Obama's right to be president had been challenged and it was going to go before a federal jury. I was there, David O. Carter, judge, magistrate of the U.S. Federal District Court in Santa Ana, in the Ronald Reagan courthouse. You ought to take Reagan's name off. It's a disgrace now what you did. And then he did a total flip-flop, and it never went to a trial by jury. Not all judges are crooks. I have a lot of respect for Judge Gray, who's retired in Orange County. I have respect for certain other judges, one or two here in Santa Barbara, but they're retired. Anyway, I want to take you back. Listen to what Mr. Collins' attorney said to me right outside of Department A in Burbank. If you didn't see this on my other show, watch it now because this is amazing what he said. Here we go. Sir, would you like to go on camera and tell me what we just saw and explain it? But outside the courthouse, because I think Judge Stewart would have us arrested if we did the interview in the courtroom. I was not taking any chances because I could see this judge was really miffed, and he'd been such a pleasant, mellow fellow up until the Collins case. So we went outside, and this is what I filmed just this morning. Hear it directly from Attorney Finley. Here we go. William Wagner here down at the Burbank Superior Court.
Okay. I have other friends.
On this Friday morning in February, we had Judge William D. Stewart, who seemed through many cases before this to be Mr. Nice Guy Judge. Had a sense of humor until this case with Collins came up. I'll let his attorney explain what we just saw in court. Sir, would you use your name and what just happened?
My name is Michael Finley. I'm an attorney. I would like to also say that I've been in front of this judge before, and I do have a lot of respect for him. I'm not sure why things happened the way that they happened today in court, but basically, here's what we were doing. We were submitting a judgment based upon a certified transcript of the proceedings, of the trial that happened. It was concluded November 10th in this courtroom. We submitted a judgment based upon the judge's specific wording in that hearing, okay? There's been objections by other parties who claim that if the judgment is entered the way that the court worded it, that it may have some kind of an impact upon their interest in the property. And they've submitted a different proposed judgment that we don't feel accurately reflects what the judge said at that hearing. We don't even see how they have standing to make this kind of a challenge. They weren't parties to this case at the time of the trial. So the judge gave us options. One option was to strike one of the paragraphs from our proposed judgment, which is something that the judge exactly said in the transcript, or to scrap the case and start over from the beginning as a quiet title action. And he didn't make one of the options to be to sign the judgment the way it's worded that accurately reflects his ruling from the transcript. I did ask him to look at the transcript, and he actually threw the transcript across the room. And then I tried to make a record of what happened because we have a court reporter who was present today recording what was happening. I tried to state for the record the fact that he threw the transcript across the room, and he cut me off and prevented me from putting that on the official record of today's proceedings. Again, I have a lot of respect for this judge, and I think the Judge Stewart is intelligent. I think he's hardworking. I think he tries to do a very good and well thought out result in his cases. So what happened today definitely surprised me. I don't think it will impact my opinion of him as a judge in the future. I hope that we can work through this. We've been given 30 days to basically pick between two options, none of which include having a judgment entered the way the judge stated on the record November 10th. So it's frustrating for us to decide what to do. And again, I don't even understand how we can be put in this position of discussing the judge basically changing his ruling from what he ordered with no new trial.
Yeah, how does Judge Stewart get away? To me, this should be a felony. He ordered this, and now he's trying to coerce that attorney, Michael Finley, into changing what he had ordered. And there's a strange voice on the phone who represents two other financial banks that had demurred out of the case. So they had no standing to say anything. This is highly inappropriate. Highly inappropriate. I can't pound that hard enough. Highly inappropriate. Judge Stewart needs to retire, and then he should be indicted. And he should be stripped of his pension. I watched him, and a dozen other witnesses watched him. We could get a dozen affidavits. He tried to coerce Attorney Finley into changing the order that he himself had ordered. How crooked does it have to get before we, the people, form our own grand juries? Under the ruling of that U.S. versus Williams case, that's the late Judge Justice Antoine Scalia, who I have a lot of respect for, not because he's dead, but because he made several other rulings that I thought at the time were a little harsh, but I think he's dead on. No pun intended. Judge Scalia, reaffirmed the right of we the people. And I promise you I'd give you this. This is what you do. You put a notice, in a newspaper. It has to issue at least twice. We're forming a grand jury. not run by the government, run by we the people. We are looking for volunteers who will serve 1 or 2 days a week on several grand juries. Then you gather up all your victims of the court corruption, divide them into 2 or 3 different grand juries. And why is this legal? Because they might have some prejudice? Because of the Cruden case back in Carolina in 1796. The Cruden case. The grand juries are not supposed to be totally not knowing anything about anything. But in any case, you have the victims from one grand jury go to grand jury B and testify under oath. You have the grand jury recorder, keep a record, then they vote. But before you do that, you have to get a notary, and there's lots of them. Pick one that's well respected, well known, and well established. Not somebody who just came from the Philippines and is going to leave in 6 months and go back to the Philippines. That's a whole different scandal I'm not going to get into. But you get a respected notary who notarizes your oath of office for the grand jury. You say, well, where do I find an oath of office? Well, you can Google it, or you could go to your county and say, I want to see the oath of office signed by the last 3 grand jury foremans and the members. Not the current one, because they might think you're going to try to tamper with the current grand jury, but the former grand juries. Look at their oath, get that exact same oath, sign it, get it notarized as you sign it. You get 21 people, 23, up to no more than 25 people. You form your grand jury, you file it with the county clerk. Once you file that, you, according to Scalia, as I read it in 504 U.S. 36, you are above the judges, you're above the legislature, and you're above the governor or the president. You are above all branches of government, and as we the people, grand jury, you speak for the sovereign people of America, or at least your county. That's how you form these grand juries, and then you take evidence, you vote on the evidence, you report to the sheriff. Sheriff, we've got a true bill of indictment. We want you to go to arrest Judge Schmuck or Congressman Embezzlement, whatever, public official. And if the sheriff doesn't do his job, then you need to indict the sheriff for failure to do his job but first read 504 U.S. 36. Understand it fully in your own head. Don't take William Wagner's word for it. Don't trust what I'm saying. Go read the actual, it's not that hard. And if you just Google 504 U.S. 36, Antoine Scalia, Justice, a majority opinion, you'll pull up 3 or 4 websites. One of them has got it all condensed down to 2 pages. Boom, 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 bullet points. Then go read the whole thing so you understand. We the people have either got to do this to get the criminals out of the courts, the criminals off the bench, the criminals of the Bar Association put in prison, and there's probably most of the Bar Association. There are a few exceptions, I'll grant you. There are some honest, hardworking, decent attorneys, but they're few and hard to find. And few and far between. Anyway, that's how you do it. As we close tonight, instead of playing the soothing sounds of John Henry Cassani, which I'd love to do, there's some information on vaccinations that I've been meaning to play for you for a long time. And I think Donald Trump is absolutely right on vaccinations. Perhaps the vaccines we had in the 60s and the 70s were safe. The ones we've been using through the late 80s and 90s and into this century are not safe. I bid you good night. Thank you for watching as I express my educated opinion after going to hundreds and hundreds of courtrooms. Most of them are corrupt. You know they're corrupt when they screen you for weapons. When the bailiffs have weapons, the judges have weapons, and the worst weapons are the lies told by the attorney. Well, they swear everybody in the courtroom promised to tell the truth, but the attorneys never raised their hand. They never promised to tell the truth about anything. Just watch it someday. See ya. Thanks for watching tonight.
by hospital scientists all over the world that say that mercury is neurotoxic, that it's causing damage to our children, that when you give it to mice, when you give it to rats, when you give it to hamsters, pheasants, goats, cows, that they develop autism-like symptoms or other neurodevelopmental disorders. These studies show that mercury is linked to the cascade of pediatric neurological neurodevelopmental disorders that began hitting Americans in 1989. The birth cohort, the children who were born in 1989 were the sickest generation of children in the history of our country. CDC says 1 out of every 6 of those children has some kind of neurodevelopmental disorder. 43% of them have a chronic disease, a neurodevelopmental disorder or a food allergy, asthma, eczema, or juvenile diabetes or an autoimmune disease. This is not normal. 43% of our children have a chronic disease. That is not normal. It began in 1989. 1989 is the year that EPA says is the gateway year. That's the year all of these epidemics began in that year. So we know this, that genes do not cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin. So the question that journalists ought to be asking, instead of just parroting what CDC's its safety assurance is, if it's not the thimerosal in vaccines, then what is it? What is the toxin that touched every American demographic in 1989, from Cubans in Biscayne Bay, Miami, to Inuit in Homer, Alaska, and that affects boys disproportionately to girls? Because the toxic, that fingerprint for that is mercury. Mercury impacts boys because testosterone amplifies the neurotoxic effect of the mercury molecule. And estrogen wraps the molecule and protects the female brain. So it's mainly boys who got injured. And all of these diseases, ADD, ADHD, OCD, speech delay, language delay, misery disorder, all of the sleep disorders, seizures, all of these things, and ASD and autism are impacting boys disproportionately to girls. So you have to match the toxin. A lot of people say, well, maybe it's the glyphosate from the pesticides. Maybe it's PFOA from flame retardants. Maybe it's ultrasound. There's a number of hypotheses. They all should be investigated. But none of them has the timing or the sexual dimorphism that we see that we need to explain when we look at these disorders. So CDC and journalists for many years have been parroting the assurances that no science exists that actually links the mercury to these illnesses. Here I'm giving you 240 studies that are on PubMed and make that link. We looked up thimerosal and these impacts on PubMed, and we got every study that we could find. We didn't cherry pick them. We got all of them. So here are all of the studies that we found that link it to non-autism neurodevelopmental disorders and other disorders like food allergies. This pile is 81 studies, and I'll let you see it, that link thimerosal exposure to autism. And this is the pile of studies that show that thimerosal is safe. 0, not 1, none. None that even pretends to. So why is it that journalists have been telling us that there's lots of science out there? Because they're accepting the word of people at CDC. And CDC has to be, CDC